This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the November Development. Oh, sorry. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November Development and Environment Services Committee meeting. Just a quick note to tell you that this meeting will be audio recorded, and those in attendance should refrain from making any defamatory statements. There's been no other recordings of this meeting without prior authorization of the committee. Do we have any apologies?
Mr. Chair, an apology from Councillor Watts.
Would someone like to move that apology is accepted?
I'll move it.
Councillor Abbott, second Councillor Campbell, all in favour? Any declarations of interest?
Neil received.
None. Public participation, I believe we have two. Is that correct? Which is Eric Smith, who's going to speak about the rural subdivision in Marrible, and also Richard Hollins about the removal of the facility over 21A Oxford Road. So we'll deal with each of those public participations at the start of that agenda item. As there are no site inspections, we move straight to DESC 11.1, which is the rural subdivision, one lot into two lots. So, Eric Smith is he's on Zoom. Can you hear all right, Eric?
It's very echoey, but I can hear, yes.
Right, well, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you'd like to say a piece, and then if committee members have any questions, they'll be able to ask you. And away we go.
All right.
Yeah.
Just give me a moment. I've just got to figure out how to share a screen. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. So we've been advised that the DA for proposed rural subdivision has been recommended for refusal. So we've just got a few, I guess, comments and bit of information to provide in relation to that. So this is the proposal. Basically, we have one large lot that is being cut into two. So you've got grey shading for lot 41, proposed lot 41, and sort of beige shading for 42. Access is from Killingwell Road over existing tracks, which are formed and meet the requirements of Rural Fire Service, with the exception of the crossing over the Merriwar River, which currently is a low-level crossing. The proposed lot sizes are acceptable in relation to the minimum lot size, and there's nothing in the zone that prohibits the subdivision. So council's given 5 stated reasons for the refusal of the DA. In summary, it's saying that the use of the low-level crossing is likely to impact on the water quality and stability of the bed and banks of the watercourse. The vehicular access is not available, suitable vehicular access is not available to the proposed lots. The access does not enable safe and efficient movement of vehicles to and from the proposed lots. Council is unwilling to accept the transfer of a Crown Road that is disconnected from the existing road network, and the site is not suitable for the development as it does not provide safe access to and from the public road system for emergency services and for occupants faced with evacuation. So just to rebut those points. The first one goes on about the water quality and stability of the bed and banks. So the existing low-level water crossing is established and stable. Increased traffic due to one additional rural lot is unlikely to impact the water quality or the stability of the riverbed, which is shingle and rock over a bedrock base, or the stability of the banks, which are well vegetated. The applicant is also prepared to take steps necessary to design and construct a culvert in accordance with the requirements of NRA, the Natural Resource Access Regulator, the Rural Fire Service and Council. So council could issue a conditional consent on this basis. So here's a photograph of the existing low-level crossing. As you can see, the bed is quite solid shingle and rock over a solid bedrock base. Then the second point is that the suitable vehicular access is not available to the proposed lots. So in relation to that, the existing access roads comply with the requirements of the Rural Fire Service, with the exception of the river crossing, which we've discussed as we're happy to have upgraded. The low-level river crossing is currently being used and will continue to be used if this development is refused. And a better outcome for all would be to construct a new crossing to meet the current and future requirements. Existing accesses use formed roads within legal corridors, whether those are on a carriageway or a crown road. Again, they all comply with the Rural Fire Service requirements. So safe and efficient movement of vehicles is possible using the existing roads. The applicant is willing to upgrade roads as necessary, and upgrades to roads could be made conditions of consent. So here's an aerial photograph looking at the river crossing in the centre of the image, looking up towards Kallingall Road in the distance. And then you can see the existing access road, which has been formed, and it's got blue metal on it. So it's, well suitable for vehicles up to 23 tonnes, which is a requirement of Rural Fire Service. Looking the other way, again, you can see it's through open grassland. And again, looking down the cleared patch to the right upper part of the photo is one of the proposed potential dwelling locations. And from the ground, as you can see, again, the track has been gravelled, formed. It's perfectly suitable as an access. The fourth reason was that council would be unwilling to accept the transfer of a Crown Road. Now, Crown Roads provide access to freehold and leasehold land where little or no subdivision has occurred since the original Crown subdivision of New South Wales in the early 19th century. That's directly copied from the Crown Lands website. There is no requirement for Crown Roads to be transferred to council as public roads. They can continue to be used as Crown Roads for, 1 or 2 or 10, however many people want to use them. They don't have to be a public road in order to be used for access. There's no requirement for council to maintain them or to transfer them to as a public road to their list of assets to be maintained. There was no proposal from the applicant that council accept these roads, and I don't know why this assumption has been made or that this has been put up as a reason. The fifth reason was that the site is not suitable for development as it doesn't provide safe access to and from the public road system for emergency services and for occupants faced with evacuation. Now, in relation to that, the existing river crossing, happy to upgrade. In relation to bushfire, the New South Wales Rural Fire Service does have provision for isolated rural developments, which says where developments are located in isolated areas, occupants may need to travel large distances through bushfire-prone vegetation, and firefighters are unlikely to be able to provide assistance. For this reason, the conditions placed upon isolated developments reflect the need for occupants to be more self-sufficient in regards to firefighting. As such, they're going to need a larger asset protection zone, perimeter roads, and dedicated firefighting water supply and associated firefighting equipment on site, in accordance with Table 5.3D of the Planning for Bushfire Protection document. This has all been explained in the bushfire hazard assessment that was submitted with the DA and appears to have been, misinterpreted perhaps. In relation to flood events, with the current low-level crossing and assuming that flows more than 300 millimetres above zero flow at the Merriwall gauging station, if that is considered to be an unsafe level of flow to cross. We don't have flood records to say anything other. So let's say 300 millimetres, that's a fair bit of water, let's call that unsafe. That would give us 463 days out of 4,070 days where the crossings are unsafe in the current format. If the river crossing is upgraded, then that could be improved. You could bring it down to, 100 days or 50 days, with council's consent and making this a condition, you could get a better solution for all involved. So in conclusion, the existing low-level crossing, while it is stable and on bedrock with stable banks, obviously this appears to be unacceptable. So the applicant is prepared to upgrade the river crossing, and the NRA requirements are for either a bridge or a culvert. And we've spoken with NRA, and their verbal advice was a box culvert is considered appropriate. Existing access arrangements use legal corridors and formed roads. The access roads are all weather two-wheel drive roads with the exception of the river crossing. By doing the development, it allows the applicant to upgrade the river crossing, which will be continued to be used by the current users whether or not the development is approved. So this is a chance to improve everything for the greater good, not just leave it be. And while upgrading the river crossing is going to be expensive, it's not financially viable unless the applicant can subdivide and sell the proposed lot 41 to recoup that cost. In my opinion, council can and should approve the subdivision subject to conditions relating to the provision of suitable access, in particular upgrading the current crossing of the Merriwar River to a box culvert in accordance with NRA, Council and Rural Fire Service requirements. The subdivision is permitted in the zone, meets minimum lot size requirements and meets the requirements of the Rural Fire Service in relation to isolated rural development, and allows the applicant to fund the improvement of the existing crossing of the Merriwar River. Thank you for your time, and yeah, if anyone has any comments or questions, I'm happy to address those.
Thank you, Eric. That was excellent. I'm going to ask my committee if they've got any questions. Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I just have one. Who maintains the crossing if it's not a public road? Obviously, it needs to be maintained for crossing and the emergency services. So who would do that?
Sorry, I could not understand that question.
Sorry, I apologise. I'm wearing a mask, so it was my fault. I'm just wondering if it doesn't become a public road, the crossing area, who will be maintaining it?
When a Crown Road is used by adjoining owners for access, the responsibility for maintaining that Crown Road comes down to the users of that road with the permission of Crown Road. So if they need to do minor work to maintain or repair the road, they can do that as a matter of course with no application. If they're doing major work to establish an access in a corridor or things like that, there is an application process that can be gone through. But basically the idea of a Crown Road, particularly in an isolated situation like that, is that it would be maintained by the users of the road, and it's certainly nothing to do with council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please, I do, thank you. And I also must commend Eric on your presentation, very thorough. You spoke about the existing tracks. Are they on the Crown Road alignments, or are they just going through someone's paddock? That's my first question. Would you deal with that one first? Okay,
it's a combination of both. There is existing rights of carriageway which give legal access to the existing lot. At the moment, the track that is being used crosses land on the western side of the river in a right of carriageway that benefits adjoining land but not the subject land. So the intention is, when we do the subdivision, we will release, there is a legal right of carriageway, but the track doesn't currently go through that corridor. So the intention is, when we do the subdivision, we release the old right of carriageway and create a new right of carriageway over the existing track, which will line up exactly with the right of carriageway that benefits the adjoining land, just to tidy all that up, make it all legal and practical. Once it crosses the river, the track then goes through what is currently lot 4, and the intention is to create a right of carriageway benefiting the further lot over the nearer lot. And once it then gets closer to the proposed dwelling site, it actually enters the Crown Road and then traverses over a couple of sort of forested, not really forested, treed areas. They've got a very open understory, and then it enters the second lot. So it's a combination of right of carriageway and Crown Road access.
Thank you. A further question, Mr. Chair, is clarification. The right of carriageway, in other words, you're going to release one right of carriageway, but then it's proposed that you create another one. Is that correct? What I'm saying is that I personally would like to see that ensure that make sure that does happen, because I think if this proposal goes ahead, it's very important for perhaps future owners, if it changes hands, the land changes hands, that they have a proper legal access.
Absolutely. So the intention, as I say, is to release the easement, which at the moment it is legal, but it's not where the track runs. So to tidy that up, we will release that, and at the same time, it'll create a new right of carriageway. We've already negotiated with the owner on the western side of the river. They're prepared to accept the swap so that the old one is released, the new one is created. It actually works better for them because instead of having 2 separate legal corridors over their land, they only have one. It's still the same people using it, so they're actually effectively better off in terms of the land that is burdened on their side versus the land that is not. Yeah, so definitely from our point of view, there's no intention to provide an access that is not fully legal. So right of carriageway is considered to be our preferred method to cross private land, particularly when we're dealing with only, 2, maybe 3 rural lots. So, if we count the other user of the river crossing, you're looking at 3. If you're using the future subdivision, you've got 2 rural lots. So you're very limited in the use of the track, but we definitely want it legal.
Thank you. Maybe this is a question to you, Matt. If this proposal goes ahead, what obligations does council have in maintaining, or obligations that they have to in any of this subdivision?
Mr. Chair, I guess it's on the right of carriageway of the landowners that maintain the road. Our concern was any works on ground roads that would trigger a transfer of the ground road to council. Council would be responsible for maintaining the road if it was transferred. There are some transfer guidelines from Crown lands, which lists different criteria for where a transfer is triggered. And one of those criteria is where Crown road is required to be maintained to standard specified as 12%, or if there's works required on the road bring up to a certain standard, generally Crown lands would want to transfer that land to council. That's the reason for one of their reasons for review.
So, in effect, the council could be responsible for this for the maintenance of the road into the and across the river crossing. Is that correct?
I don't know whether the river crossing was to a right of carriageway, but other sections of ground road, if they were to be transferred, would be council's responsibility.
But am I correct, Mr. Perry, that is not your intention to be wanting some of the ground roads to be transferred to council? Is that correct?
Yeah, no, the applicant is quite happy to maintain the roads, the physical roads within the Crown Road Reserve. And as I've mentioned in the presentation and in my discussions with Crown Roads, there is no requirement for the roads to be handed to council. So if the applicants are happy in that they understand that the access is via Crown Road and that the maintenance responsibility is theirs, then there's no reason for council to take it on, and there's certainly no no request or anything from the applicant's side that council do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just could I ask the General Manager, is there some requirement later on that this goes ahead, everything's fine, and then perhaps the applicant or a future owner says, look, I think it should be council responsibility. Could that come to pass?
Yeah, thanks through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Campbell. Whilst the advice you've been given is correct, there's no legal requirement for us to take it on unless directed to by the Crown. And Mr. Pringle's pointed out the triggers that might require the Crown to transfer the road to us. There's very rarely a week that goes by in this organisation where a resident brings us up for maintenance of the road and they are advised that that's not part of our road schedule maintenance program because the road's not part of our road network. We then get the continual argument backwards and forwards, well, why did council approve this lot development? Why am I, how do I have legal access if you don't maintain the road? It's quite a complex conversation that has to occur between council and the resident to explain the difference between wanting to maintain the road and a legal road access. And as you discussed this morning, there's no question over the legal access. However, the maintenance responsibilities are in question. I think with what's been proposed by the proponent now, they're also proposing to add a 3 or 4 cell box culvert structure over the river. Councillor Abbott's quite rightly pointed out the question of who owns and maintains that. There would be in future a potential burden on council if there was any pressure brought to bear on council to take out of that road, because it would also be taken out of that bridge or culvert structure. We certainly wouldn't be inspecting that structure, so there's a risk associated with that structure being built in a river and not having regular inspection. It wouldn't be part of our regular inspection program. So I think there's additional matters for council to consider before making the final decision. Thank you. Is there any further questions for the public participation section? So I will now hand over to Matt for your summation of this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very well complete information on this proposal now, so I'll just get to the 2 key issues, I guess, for us. The first one is the providing all weather two-wheel drive access. We are concerned with the access over the Greenville River. But as Smith pointed out, the applicant is now looking at installing a box culvert over the river to provide access. But we've only received that information late, we haven't had time to assess it. And we would need to refer that off to the relevant government departments for consideration. The other issue is the use of Crown land.
Sorry, can you just repeat?
Yeah. So the information that we're given today, and it was a late submission from Mr. Smith, but the applicant was prepared to construct the box culverts through the Greenville River. That hasn't been assessed by staff. It would trigger integrated development, and we have to give help to the relevant government agency for assessment before we can make a decision on that aspect. So that's the first issue, is that all weather two-wheel drive access. The second issue was the use of the Crown roads, whether or not the work, the extent of the road that we required for those roads to be upgraded, whether that would then trigger the transfer of that road to council. As I said, I have guidelines here from Crown lands. It's quite clear what the triggers are. And some of those triggers are if the road is to be upgraded to provide suitable access, or if there's conditions of consent required the road to be maintained, triggers the transfer of that ground road to council. So there are 2 key issues. The other issue, we also have a development control that basically says you can have any more than 3 lots gaining access via the road carriageway. So in this situation, you could end up with that, but I don't think that's a showstopper in my view. So if council is of a mind to look at a different recommendation, then I think we need more time to reassess the information that's been submitted.
Yeah, for my benefit, that would require more time prior to the November council meeting. That's a given. It's gone on.
That's correct. We need more time to have referred out to relevant agencies, probably more advice on Crown Road issue.
Thank you. I do have a concern. I think the idea of box culverts are very good. However, if they are not installed correctly, I also know the volume of water goes down those roads. It's not on the post of our farm. We don't have any. However, it's in the next valley. That if they are not installed correctly and maintained, they will cause a problem. I'm just wondering whether a suitable and a correctly installed causeway would be a suitable idea. So I'm really wondering whether or not we should have more time to get advice, not only on that issue, but to make a decision on it today. I'm quite weary. So I'd like to defer the decision.
So through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm happy with the self-recommendation.
So you'll say in my turn, I was somewhat confused on first reading of the paper. It seemed very obvious, open and shut case to me. I'm reading the submissions from Mr. Smith and hearing his presentation today. I'm rather swaying the other way, and this could possibly be conditioned out. And that we might be dealing with hypotheticals, such as requirements to take over the Crown Road and others. I would be probably erring on the side of deferring this and the proponent to provide more information on the river crossing and how the conditions look like and getting the approvals required. You'd like to...
Mr. Chairman, I'm with that. Well, I'm not against the subdivision as per se, but I just do believe the detail of the matter should be investigated and should have clear and concise answers to those things before we can go ahead with the contract. So I would like to move the matter be deferred, pending the inspection and report from the would-be council engineers to know about the crossing and the other matter with the Crown Road.
I'll second.
I'm against the deferral. It's quite plain.
Okay, so the deferral is carried. Move to page 25, which is the aircraft hangar. The going application 111/2021. There's no one speaking on this. I'm going to hand straight to Matt. Summation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application is for the aircraft hangar at number 6 Airfield Road, East County. I think we have a so we show the location of the hangar. So it's a 21 by 21 metre by 6.75 metre height on steel aircraft tank shed. Hanging office lounge, accessible unisex shower and toilet facilities. There's 4 on-site car parks and 1 accessible car park. And there's 1 metre wide chain mesh fence and 8 metre wide double gates to access the elevators. So there we go. That's up on the screen there. The reason it's coming before the DNE committee today is because there's a couple of non-compliances with our development control plan. First one is that Our BCP requires each hanger to be 15 by 12 metres in size. And this hanger proposed 21 by 21, but greater in size than what the BCP requires. However, in this case, we feel that the proposed hanger size is appropriate. We don't have any issues, there's no impact. The second control is that no structures, including plants, or aerials, intrude into the obstacle limitation surface. And in this case, the application wasn't accompanied by the required certificate of arrest displayed. However, the staff wanted to take an assessment, and it's quite clear that the proposal is well under the application surface. So we're satisfied that it meets that requirement. And the third one was that hanger lots are used only for the purpose of constructing light aircraft. And in this case, that's, I guess it's going to be larger aircraft that will be using the facility. Now, I think those issues are not really that significant. We're happy to recommend the approval of the application. So,
all right, we'll go first on this one, I think. Now, council. I'm not the chair, or do you want to? You move it?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I think it's good development, and the extra solid, but it's a good bit of think about for my friends, on the recommendation.
Second.
I'll make a comment, Mr. Chair. Well, I think this is great. I mean, the size, as Mr. Pinkle said, is not overly important. These people want to build these bigger hangars to bring bigger planes and bring more economy into our shire. I think it's only great, and move forward and sell a couple more blocks. Thank you.
So moved by Councillor Campbell. I'll happily second. We're all in favour. Carried. Which moves us to DSC 11.3, the demolition of the dwelling, shed and retaining wall at 21 Oxford Road, 21A Oxford Road. We have a public participant, Richard Hollins. Okay. Richard, you can either sit at the desk if you prefer and turn the microphone on, or stand at the lectern, whichever you're most comfortable at. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Upper Hunter Shire Council, for giving me the opportunity to present to you. My name is Richard Hollins. I live at 48 Waverley Street, which backs onto 21A Oxford Road. I've been a resident in Scone for 8 years. I object to the DA as it stands for 21A Oxford Street. This neighbourhood of Scone is characterised by boulevard-style streets like Oxford and Waverley Street with large and mature trees. Most houses have established gardens with many trees. From the Susan Street corner, you can see a leaf canopy over the whole area. In the morning, visitors often comment to us that they don't feel like they are in a town but out in the country. The chorus of birds is quite rich, with many species living in this little area. They are here because of the environment. The trees, the established gardens provide an environment that is quite nurturing for them. Even if you don't have any interest in the local fauna, the tree cover here provides plenty of cooling shade in the hot summers that we have here in Scone. On top of that, it is well documented that streets with established trees have higher property values than those without. This development is not in keeping with the area. As proposed, the DA denudes the block of all existing vegetation. With the lack of any council policy on trees, the current owner and his predecessors have been able to remove almost all established bushes and trees without any requirement for permit. Now, the only remaining tree is a beautiful silky oak that has stood there for 40 years plus. There are dozens of naked blocks available for sale in the Scone area. If the owners of 21A Oxford Street need a block devoid of anything growing, it would have been much easier for them to choose one of those. If, however, they want to enjoy the benefits of living in a neighbourhood with established gardens and a tree canopy that they should accommodate the existing nature into their proposal. It wouldn't take a lot of imagination to fit the existing house and garage footprint as proposed into the block without clear felling everything living on the block. This tree took 40 years to grow. It is in keeping with the landscape of the neighbourhood and it should be preserved. We should be learning to live with nature, not just dominate it. Thank you.
Do any councillors have questions?
No, I'd just like to say thank you for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, look, thank you. And also thank you for coming and presenting your concerns. Yeah, look, I went round and had a look at the block this morning for this meeting. I've just noted that there's quite a few very high trees around there, especially down, there's another one on the southwestern corner, which is not on that block. And then there's a silky oak that is on this 21A. They're very high. I'm just wondering whether or not that could cause a problem of if the storm comes through and breaks it down, whether it goes onto the neighbours or this particular dwelling. How do we get on then? I'm just wondering, yeah, the trees in the street would be less likely to break off and during a storm and get onto the neighbouring houses, but those ones that are very tall down the back, I'm wondering whether a trimming of those would be better, which would not kill the trees, but certainly trim them so that there would not be a danger. How do you view that?
Well, you know, if you start sort of what-ifing about, you know, act of God type stuff, then you probably should flatten the whole block, because there's 25 lots in that Oxford Waverley Street block, I'm guessing, I don't know how many, and there's mature trees, large trees right through there, and that's the appeal of the area. You know, if you want to make sure that no tree falls on your house, you should go and build a house out on a naked block, you know, on one of the new developments. Like, you know, if we sort of take the approach that, you know, we've got to flatten everything, get rid of anything just in case a tree falls down, you know, council should be going around and lopping everything. You know, we're living in a time where it's getting hotter and hotter, and the shade from those trees, like our garden, is way cooler than what it is out in the street because we got shade in our garden. And the way that block has come into existence, you know, it's a little bit dodgy really, the way it even came into existence, because it was part of a larger house block, and the guy who did that, which you guys approved or your predecessors did, he had to actually cut a piece off his house to even make the block into a real block. And there was a very well-established garden there with bushes and trees. The block has changed hands 4 or 5 times since the guy did it, only 4 or 5 years ago. And every single person who's come in with a chainsaw and cut this, cut that, and now we're down to the last living thing on the block. And, you know, the guy wants to put a house there, which really, the way it's designed is not in keeping with the area. You know, if he moved the house or the garage footprint, he could incorporate the same size house and have a garage and leave the tree there. You know, it's just not in keeping with the area. And, you know, he wants to enjoy the benefits of living in the area, but, you know, he wants to have a setup which is completely out of keeping with the rest of the houses in the block. So, you know, Scone or Upper Hunter Council doesn't have a tree policy, but, you know, most councils in New South Wales do. And, you know, it shouldn't be that if you come into the area from outside, you can just bring your 090 still and flatten the joint so that you can. So anyway, that's, my wife asked me to speak here because she's way more upset about it than I am. But I just think, you know, what brings people to this town, you know, a lot of it is the nature. You know, Scone is lacking a lot of things, but it's not lacking nature. You know, if you want to live in that sort of place, you can live down near Newcastle, you can live in Maitland. But if you want to live in this town, you should try to adapt to the way the town is. And this town has got a lot of nature and we should preserve it.
Thank you. And I think there's one more, Richard. Hang on. I think the Mayor's got a question.
Mr. Chair, mine's going to be directed at Mr. Pringle. So.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Matt, the ruling around if a tree falls out of someone's private block and falls onto someone's building, whose responsibility is it by the law?
Through the chair, generally it's the owner of the tree, but it depends on the circumstances as well.
Yes, okay. So, as we know, trees have fallen off our footpaths and done damage and etc. And, you know, I'm not on for cutting trees down and just destroying, but if this person's thinking about the long-term future of damages and liability, that's something he's going to decide, I suppose.
I'll take that as a comment. Right, Matt, I'm going to hand over to you for your summation of this, as per usual.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application is for the erection of a dwelling house, a shed and retaining wall, and demolition of existing shed at 21A Oxford Road. The application is being reported to this committee because 3 submissions have been received in relation to the proposal. That's 3 submissions from 2 different authors. The land is zoned R1 general residential. I think we might, have we got it up on the screen, Stevie, please? Zone R1 general residential. The proposed development is permissible with consent. Our assessment indicates that the proposal complies with the Upper Hunter LEP and the Upper Hunter DCP and other relevant planning controls. The 3 submissions that we received raise concerns in relation to the loss of the tree, the silky oak tree in the rear yard. And I think we've handed out some aerial photographs that were submitted by the applicant just to show you the block, and you can see the tree at the rear. It's proposed to be removed. The other issue that was raised was the impact of stormwater on surrounding properties. So in relation to the tree, obviously we do not have a tree policy. We don't have any controls in place at the moment to protect that tree. It is unfortunate that the tree is proposed to be removed. It's not something that we take lightly, and it would be our preference to keep that tree if we could. But unfortunately, the fact is we don't have the protection in place for it. There's nothing in our controls to protect that tree. In relation to stormwater, The stormwater off the roof of the buildings will be directed to the street out to Oxford Road, and the driveway will be a pervious surface. So that would be a coarse gravel, so there'd be no dust, but it would allow the water to infiltrate through. So in our view, I don't think there'll be any stormwater issues affecting adjoining properties. Yeah, so our recommendation is that the application be approved. As I said, it is very unfortunate that the tree is to be removed. We have spoken to the applicant and tried to see if we can get the design amended so the tree could be retained. But unfortunately, the applicant didn't wish to do that for different reasons, and obviously requires that tree to be removed. So we've recommended approval subject to the conditions of consent and attachment 1.
Matt, just on this tree policy, even if we had a tree policy and that policy that was presented to council was not adopted, largely because of concerns around the intersection of the policy and individual property owners' rights. It says quite clearly in the paper that the owner is within his rights to remove that tree via the state environment planning policy on non-rural vegetation. Any tree policy that we have would not be binding and would be subservient legally to the state SEP.
So the SEP refers to Council's development control plan.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, our development control plan does not have the controls in place to protect the tree. So as I've mentioned previously, we are updating the DCP at the moment, which will have controls for tree protection. And we're looking to put that back up to Council early in the new year with a tree policy as well. The tree policy will cover not only what's happening on private land, but also on public land, and the work that Council does. It'll cover those sorts of works as well.
Right, thank you. I'm going to start now, so I'm sure you have a lot of comment, Councillor Abbott. So I'm going to start with you and hand over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to just echo Mr. Holland's remarks that we essentially are nature and we shouldn't always be trying to dominate it. I have quite a long list of comments. So first up, this silky oak. Sorry, is everything okay?
Yes, you can continue. I'm just asking the director if there's a condition we can do for offsetting.
Well, before then I start on my comments, I'd like to comment on offsets, which are very problematic because with offsetting, as we know, with our recent bushfires, a lot of the offset programs were burnt. So I think if we can avoid offsetting, we should. But anyway, back to my comments. This silky oak tree that we're discussing is a Grevillea robusta. It is a native plant. Like with this council in February 2019 declared a climate emergency. We were the second council in New South Wales to do so. Further to that, because we did that, we are trying to walk the talk, and we then declared that we would be net zero by 2030. Clearly, if we're to be net zero by 2030, trees are really important because they are carbon sinks. Taking that tree out will release a lot of carbon. We're trying to be net zero. We've just had the COP26 in Glasgow, and Australia, surprisingly, has signed up to ban deforestation by 2030. Not soon enough, but we have done that. By 2030, how many more trees will just be devastated? That's only 8 years away. However, with this tree, we have an urban heat island effect, and that is mitigated by trees. We really need our trees. And as Mr. Holland has said, the way Oxford Street and Waverley Street, they are really beautiful. The real estate agents talk about them as that sort of golden part of town because they're so leafy, because they have an urban canopy, because they keep the heat down, and because they are habitation and sanctuaries for the owls and the magpies and many, many other birds and mammals. Let's not forget that here in Australia, We have the worst mammalian extinction in the world. It is a crime, I think, to see these lovely leafy blocks being decimated. We do need a tree policy. We did put one forward. It was called a tree protection and management policy. So it had both. It would protect trees, but it also did look to the fact that sometimes trees do need to come down, not in this case. We also need a council arborist because we have a lot of engineers on this council, but we don't have our very own arborist. And we probably need a horticulturist as well. Our biodiversity is plummeting, and it really distresses me that we're going to add to this with this development application to further habitat loss. I can't see why we can't actually have a discussion as to rearrange things. Trees bring a sense of peace and tranquility, and they add value. We only have to think of Sheffield, a city in Britain, where they removed thousands of trees and the community got together and basically revolted. They were not going to have any more of that. And in the end, the council did stop. And now it is too late for those thousands of trees that were cut down. But now they're starting to realize how important the trees were to Sheffield. Too little, too late. We know, we have also talked we have our climate action strategy, and I haven't got the name right, but you know what I mean. We've got the draft climate action strategy just finished on public exhibition until it's decided. Obviously, people can we can keep comments trickling in. But we have looked at urban canopies as a strategy for net zero. So what are we doing this? Okay, there may be a legal right, as you have said, as has been said, but it doesn't mean, in this day and age, that doesn't mean you then have a moral and ethical right to take out all the trees. I would like to continue. I disagree with part 11 of the DCP, which is listed on page 68 in our business papers. This is a native plant. Grevillea robusta are native. Its common name is silky oak. It's not an oak. It's not a quercus. It's a silky oak. It's a grevillea. Now, Section 60B of the Local Land Services Act, Section 60B subsection 2, in my view, gives a broader meaning to it. And so it's not literal as to mean that particular tree when it was planted. It's supposed to mean the entire species. So that when European settlers came here, Grevillea robusta were all already happening. So I just think, yes, so basically, it's an incorrect interpretation. And I would just like to point out that it was first formally described, that's the Grevillea robusta, which this tree is, in 1830 by Robert Brown after an unpublished description by Alan Cunningham, who is obviously someone that we've noted because we've named a road after him. Now, the thresholds also are incorrect. Current research of urban contexts are showing how incredibly important urban canopies are for wildlife and for us. In my view, there is nowhere in the Act that post-1938 is a term that's considered that could then be quoted to us as why this tree has to come down. This is a native tree. I'm just going to go to page 72 now because I have more comments over here. So if you look at the submitters' concerns, and we have everything there is relevant, but I'm just going to draw your attention to, under planning comment, the comment that the removal of the tree will devalue. We have set targets for net zero by 2030. And again, I repeat that the urban canopy is part of that. And trees are carbon sinks. We must remember that. Now, finally, the Upper Hunter Shire Council, this is this paragraph, makes strong commitments to the community on multiple fronts. This includes sustainability and biodiversity, but also includes urban and economic development. Now, I just want to say that we have a reputation now that we are trying to do something about the climate emergency that faces us. We need to be better at tree protection. There are too many trees that just come out, and we need, if we can, we need them all. The last paragraph, basically the removal of a tree within the urban context does not necessarily undermine council's commitment to the environment, as all variables are taken into account, including the rights of the property owner in question to remove vegetation that has been actively planted by a previous owner, in addition to their own needs in developing their vacant residential property within the urban context. That paragraph makes a mockery of our biodiversity and urban canopy commitments for our net zero attempt, which is only 8 years away. I have more to say. I'd like to now go to page 86. Okay, so under flora and fauna on page 86, I just want to, for clarification, because I've been focusing on the large Grevillea robusta native tree. So to be clear, there's 6 trees are there that are to be removed. And I also want to say, because it's listed here, this is not an oak tree. I want that noted. It's not an oak tree. It is not a quercus. It is a silky oak, and it is identified as being a native species. And also the assumption that the smaller trees are unlikely to be natives is based on what? What are those trees? What is that assumption? What does that actually mean? And 4 meters is significant. A 4-meter tree is a large tree. It will definitely provide at least sanctuary for resting birds as they perch. On page 87, is the development in the public interest? The public interest requires a commitment from council to trees and urban canopies. We are heating up. We are not on track to keep below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is, we're talking about 2050. If we're aiming for 2050, it's a catastrophe. What we need to be doing now is well and truly underway by 2030. As I said, we are heating up, and pretending or ignoring global warming is not happening will make it worse. And surely there can be amended conditions to include the trees in this development. I find this so upsetting that I've been to the garden on Waverley Street. I've seen that garden. I've seen what an oasis it is. I've also know Oxford Street really well. I know Waverley Street. I've done a lot of door knocking over the years. I've done a lot of letterboxing, and they are beautiful streets. I know that block in question because I used to visit the house when it was a great big block. And it was always very beautiful and very wooded. We have to get back to that. And I would urge this council to think about trying to amend the development application and how we can, and this is through you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I've been looking at Mr. Pringle, but it's through you. But we need to be thinking about how we can save this tree, because it's not just Mr. Holland and his family. I know that obviously there was another submission from Mrs. O'Brien. I think there are a lot of neighbours are really troubled by this. Scone is troubled by this. People come and live here because they think Scone is a beautiful place. We are talking about Scone today because it's in Scone. Whenever I tell anybody, and I'm originally from Britain, that I'm from Scone, everybody says, oh, that is such a beautiful part of the world. It is, but we need to protect it. It's gradually being diminished. And I would urge this council to not approve this recommendation, but to go back to the proponent and ask if there is anything we can do to save the silky oak. And I'm not sure about the other trees because I only noticed those in the papers, but I would be interested to know what they are. But this tree is not a quercus. It's a Grevillea robusta. It's a native tree. It's a big tree, and it's a home and a sanctuary to many birds and insects and mammals. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Campbell, do you have any comments?
Yes, just one thing. Has the proponent investigated fully the reconfiguration of his development application to allow this tree to stay?
Through the chair, that's right.
I'll let Matt answer that fully.
Yeah, through the chair, we have had discussions with the applicant about that, about redesigning the development to be able to keep the tree. And as I said earlier, the applicant has said no, that they cannot.
Yes, I'm aware of it, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for reminding me of that. I did read that, but yeah, I just wonder whether that could take place. Is there any further way we can see if it could be configured? Is it final that there is nothing more that can be done in order to reconfigure the development?
as I've said through the chair, that we've had those conversations and explored those options, and the answer was no.
Righto. You've got no further comment? No.
No, Mr. Chair.
To me, look, it's unfortunate, but I think we've got to keep these things in perspective. It is one tree. This is a vacant house in an enviable location on one of Scone's premier residential streets. It represents infill of a vacant block, which to me is much more preferable to developing new land for residential buildings. So I don't see any valid planning reason that would survive a court case why this shouldn't be approved.
I did, and I admit, if I may ask for your indulgence, could there be a condition that if this tree is removed, that suitable other, perhaps it's only a fairly small block, trees be planted on that block that would fit in with the surroundings? Is that possible? I thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to ask that question.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is possible. Have a condition of consent requiring a replacement tree to be established.
Mr. Chair, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
Please. Yes. So basically, just with respect to your remark that this is just one tree, this is just one tree all the time. We just take one tree down, and it isn't just one tree. It's our whole approach to trees in Australia. We don't view ourselves as nature. We view ourselves with the right to dominate nature. And we have to change that. This tree is important. It's almost a precedent to what we're doing with our climate change and our strategy and what we're trying to endeavour with the fact that we've just closed submissions on the draft climate action strategy. And then we're going to chop down this beautiful tree that is known habitat, and it has full of birds and possums and insects and all sorts of animals that live there. I think it's really important. I know that the owner has the legal right, but the ethical and the moral right to keep chopping trees down. I mean, this has to stop. It has to stop.
You've mentioned that already, Councillor.
Well, I'd just like to, your comment about this is just one tree, I dispute that.
Well, it is just one tree. Anyway, I'm prepared to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I will second it, but I'm hoping between now and the council meeting that there's more information coming. So I will second the motion as it is.
More information
on the yeah. Look, I really don't want to see the tree go, but on the other hand, I think that we need to be very careful about what we're doing here now. This is just perhaps a side incident, but the peepal tree emits most oxygen. Its origins from India, and it's even oxygen day and night. Maybe we should think about some of those trees in Australia. It's a side issue to what we're talking about here.
Yes, it is. So are you seconding the recommendation? Or?
Yes, I will second it, Mr. Chair.
And Councillor Abbott will oppose?
I am definitely opposed, and I am so disappointed yet again with this council.
So the motion is carried. Part 7 is councillor questions. Are there any questions?
Just in relation to the tree and how part of this document, through you, Mr. Chair, did rely on the fact that that tree hadn't been planted before European settlement. We seem to carry a lot of weight. That seemed to carry a lot of weight. Well, I'm just wondering, we're quite silent on our land rights and native title and reparation. And I just feel there's a real disconnect with all sorts of things that we try and get through in the name of development and the built environment. There's so much more that we need to be doing. And I just think, so my question is, When are we going to have a tree policy? When are we going to have a Upper Hunter Shire Council arborist employed? When are we going to take the environment really seriously? And when are we going to protect our urban canopies? And also, with respect to Crown lands and native title and land rights, when are we going to have really meaningful discussions about that, rather than always trying to get out of our responsibilities and how we can acquire that land for our own purposes? So those are my questions.
I think they'll all be taken on notice. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Campbell, any questions?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a question, but I would like to make a statement, if I may.
Well,
okay, and it's to
Councillor questions.
I'd really rather not. It's councillor questions. They're
okay,
really,
fine.
They're really
if
about
I may.
development applications that are in the pipeline or stuff to do with development and environmental services.
Mr. Chair, I forgot one question. It's on the vaping shop. So I've had quite a few complaints about the vaping shop, and I've had complaints that there are signs on the footpath right the way back along past Coles car park. I would also like to know, how did that get approval? And because we know that vaping is a gateway to smoking, we know that vaping has detrimental health effects, and it's becoming increasingly known that the unknown chemicals in vaping are dangerous. So how did Upper Hunter Shire Council, how did we do that? How did we approve that? And the signs on the footpath, how is that possible?
Through Mr. Chair, the signs on the footpath haven't been approved, so it is something that we will address. The use of the building itself was either approved through a complying development certificate or as exempt development, so they didn't need approval from council to change the use of that shop. We are dealing with the applicant at the moment in relation to the painting of the building. It is in a heritage conservation area and does not comply with our DCP. So we are addressing that issue with the owner and the applicant at the moment, the painting of the building. But certainly the signage I'm aware of, and we'll be sorting that out.
Selling vaping products is not legal in this country. You can't even import them without a prescription.
I'm certainly not an expert in that field, but I understand that.
It was just a brief comment, but unless you have a prescription, you can't buy these products or import them. So if they're selling them over the counter, then that might be an issue for either council or even other authorities. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. Everyone done?
Yeah,
No,
it's not a councillor question. No, it's not a councillor question.
That's fine.
If I may, and I'd like to be noted, to acknowledge Councillor Fisher for his contribution to the D&E committee as chairman. Kiwa has conducted these with fairness and an articulate way to allow the smooth running of the council committee. Thank you, Kiwa, and I really believe that you have conducted them with the sincerity of the person that you are. So thank you very much. Could that be noted, please?
Thank you for that comment. I suppose I'll allow it not being a question in these specific circumstances of this being my last D&E meeting, but I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you. And that concludes the meeting.